Michael was a very rich man. He was a billionaire, which meant he had more money than most people could ever imagine. He lived in a big house with tall walls and many rooms. His car was fast and shiny, and he wore nice clothes. People knew Michael as a successful businessman who worked very hard every day. But Michael was not just a businessman. He was also a father to a young boy named Luke. Luke was 10 years old, but he was different from other children. He did not talk much. Most of the time, Luke stayed quiet. When people asked him questions, he gave short answers or looked away. He did not laugh loudly or shout like other kids. Instead, Luke watched the world carefully with his big, brown eyes. Michael loved Luke very much. He wanted his son to be happy and to enjoy life. But Luke's silence worried him. Sometimes, Michael would sit beside Luke and try to start a conversation, but Luke would only smile softly and say nothing more. It was like Luke was living in a world of his own. Michael tried many things to make Luke speak more. He took him to parks, to the zoo, and to fun places. He bought Luke many toys and books. He even invited other children to play with Luke. But Luke stayed quiet. He did not join the games fully. He only watched from the side, like he was afraid to join in. At night, Michael would look at Luke sleeping and wonder what was going on inside his son's mind. Luke's face was calm, but Michael could feel a sadness deep inside. He did not know why Luke was so quiet or what made him feel so alone, even in a big, beautiful house. Michael's work was very busy. He had meetings, calls, and decisions to make every day. Sometimes, he worked late into the night. But no matter how busy he was, Michael always tried to spend time with Luke. He wanted to be a good father. But the silence between them made it hard to connect. Luke's mother, Sarah, was not around. She had left when Luke was very small, and Michael never talked about her. Luke only had a few memories of her: a soft voice, a warm hug, and a day when she cried. But those memories were faint and mixed with sadness. Luke missed his mother, even if he could not say it out loud. One evening, Michael sat in the living room and watched Luke draw quietly. Luke was holding a pencil and making shapes on a piece of paper. The picture was dark, with heavy lines and little color. Michael looked closely and saw a small figure standing alone under a big cloud. "Luke," Michael said softly, "what are you drawing?" Luke did not look up. He kept drawing and said in a small voice, "It's Mommy." Michael's heart tightened. "Mommy? What about Mommy?" Luke finally looked at his father. His eyes were sad, and his voice was barely a whisper. She was lonely. She was sad. Michael wanted to say more, to comfort his son, but the words did not come. Instead, he reached out and gently took Luke's hand. For a moment, they sat quietly together, sharing the sadness without speaking. The next day, Michael tried to ask Luke more about his mother, but Luke only shook his head. "I don't want to talk," he said. Michael realized that Luke's silence was not just shyness or fear. It was something deeper. Luke was carrying pain in his heart. Michael did not know how to help, but he promised himself to be there for Luke, no matter what. As days passed, Michael noticed small changes. Luke started to smile a little more when Michael was near. Sometimes, Luke would tell a short story about school or about a bird he saw in the garden. These moments were small, but to Michael, they were like stars shining in the dark. Michael understood that love was not about money or gifts. It was about patience, understanding, and being present. He decided to listen more and talk less. He wanted Luke to feel safe and loved, even if Luke could not speak much. One afternoon, Michael took Luke to the park. The sun was warm, and children were playing everywhere. Luke watched the other kids but did not join. Michael sat beside him and said, "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I'm here." Luke looked at his father and nodded. Then, for the first time in a long time, Luke reached out and held Michael's hand. It was a small touch, but it meant a lot. Michael smiled, feeling hope. He knew the road ahead would be long and sometimes hard, but he was ready to walk it with Luke. Because a silent boy still had a voice that Michael was willing to listen to, no matter how softly it came. And in that moment, Michael understood that sometimes, the most important words are the ones not yet spoken. The mansion was big and beautiful. It had tall windows, shiny floors, and rooms filled with fine furniture and expensive decorations. Outside, the garden was green and full of flowers. But inside, the house often felt quiet and empty. Michael walked through the halls, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The house was supposed to be a happy home for him and Luke, but it felt cold sometimes. Luke's silence made the rooms feel lonely, even with all the people and things inside. Michael worked very hard every day. He had many meetings and business trips. Sometimes, he stayed late at the office, talking to important people on the phone. His work was important, but it also meant he was not always home with Luke. Luke spent most of his days alone in the big house. He played quietly by himself in his room or read books by the window. Sometimes, he went to the garden and sat under a tree, watching birds and the wind moving through the leaves. But even when he was outside, Luke felt alone. The silence in the house was more than just quiet sounds. It was a silence filled with things left unsaid. There were no loud family dinners or happy talks. Michael and Luke lived together, but they seemed far apart. One evening, Michael came home after a long day. He found Luke sitting by the fireplace, staring into the flames. The room was dim, and the firelight made shadows dance on the walls. Michael sat down beside him and watched his son. "Luke," Michael said softly, "do you want to tell me what you're thinking about?" Luke did not answer right away. He looked at the fire and then at his father. Finally, he said, "I think about Mommy." Michael's heart felt heavy. He had not expected Luke to speak about his mother so openly. "What do you think about her?" Michael asked gently. Luke's voice was quiet but steady. "I think she was sad. I think she needed help." Michael remembered the day Sarah, Luke's mother, left them. It was a day filled with tears and silence. She had been unhappy, and no one knew how to fix it. After she left, Michael promised to take care of Luke, but he had never talked about what had happened. "Did she hurt you?" Michael asked carefully. Luke looked at his father with wide eyes. He shook his head slowly. "No, she didn't want to hurt me. She just didn't know how to be happy." Michael felt a mix of sadness and guilt. He wished he could have done more to help Sarah, but he also knew that she had her own struggles. Now, he had to focus on Luke and be the father he needed to be. Days passed, and Michael tried to spend more time with Luke. He took him to quiet places where they could talk without hurry. They went to the lake, where the water was calm and the fish swam slowly. Luke liked watching the fish. It was peaceful there. At the lake, Michael said, "Luke, it's okay to feel sad sometimes. But you don't have to be sad alone. I'm here for you." Luke nodded. "I like being here with you, Dad." Slowly, Luke began to open up. He still did not talk much, but when he did, Michael listened carefully. The boy was learning to trust his father again. One afternoon, Michael found Luke in the garden, holding a small, worn-out teddy bear. The bear was old and soft, but Luke held it tightly like it was very precious. "Where did you get that bear?" Michael asked. Luke smiled softly. "Mommy gave it to me. She said it would keep me safe." Michael knelt beside Luke and took the bear in his hand. It was worn but still full of love. "I promise to keep you safe, too," Michael said. Luke looked up at his father with a small smile. For the first time in a long time, the house did not feel empty. But even as they grew closer, Michael knew there were still shadows inside Luke's heart. There were questions Luke did not ask and memories he did not share. Michael wanted to help Luke heal, but he knew it would take time. One night, Michael sat by Luke's bed after tucking him in. The boy was quiet, but Michael could feel his worry beneath the calm. "Luke," Michael whispered, "you don't have to be strong all the time. It's okay to ask for help." Luke's eyes met his father's. "I want to be strong, Dad. But sometimes, I'm scared." Michael nodded, understanding the fear in his son's voice. "We'll be strong together," he promised. The empty house was starting to fill with something new: hope. It was small and fragile, but it was there. Michael believed that love and patience could bring light to the darkest places. And he knew one day, Luke's silence would be replaced with words full of healing and happiness. For now, they were learning to live together in the quiet. Two hearts, slowly mending. The days passed slowly in the big house. Luke still did not speak much, but Michael noticed something changing in him. It was small, almost invisible: a soft smile here, a short word there, but it gave Michael hope. He wanted to help Luke heal, but the wounds inside the boy were deeper than he had imagined. Luke carried something no one else could see. It was a sadness hidden beneath his calm face, a pain he kept locked inside. It was like a secret that weighed on his heart every day. At school, Luke was quiet, just like at home. He sat at the back of the classroom, listening but rarely speaking. Teachers noticed, but they thought he was shy or maybe just a little slow to open up. His classmates tried to talk to him, but Luke stayed distant. He didn't join in games or class activities like the other children. One day, at recess, a boy named Tom came over and asked, "Hey Luke, why don't you play with us?" Luke looked at Tom but did not answer. He shook his head and walked away, holding his books close to his chest. Tom shrugged and went back to his friends. Luke's silence was a wall that kept others out, even when they wanted to be friends. After school, Luke walked home alone. The streets were busy, full of noise and people, but Luke felt invisible. He wished someone could see the hurt inside him, but he did not know how to show it. When he reached the mansion, Luke went straight to his room and closed the door. He sat on his bed, holding his teddy bear tightly. The bear was soft, but it could not take away the ache in Luke's heart. Michael often wondered what Luke was feeling. One afternoon, he decided to ask gently. "Luke," he said, "can you tell me what makes you sad?" Luke looked down, then slowly lifted his eyes to meet his father's. "I don't know how to say it," he whispered. Michael nodded. "That's okay. You don't have to say it now. But when you're ready, I'm here to listen." Luke nodded and hugged his teddy bear. Inside Luke's heart, memories stirred, memories of moments with his mother, Sarah. She had smiled sometimes, but more often, She seemed tired and worried. There were times she raised her voice, and times she cried alone in her room. Luke did not understand why. He only knew that after those moments, she seemed far away, like a stranger in the same house. One night, Luke woke from a bad dream. He sat up in bed, breathing fast and shaking. The nightmare had brought back a painful memory: his mother crying, feeling lost and alone. Michael heard the noise and came to Luke's room. He sat beside him and gently asked, "What's wrong, Luke?" Luke looked at his father with wide eyes. "I had a bad dream about Mommy," he said softly. Michael hugged Luke close and whispered, "I'm here. You're safe now." For a while, Luke stayed quiet, then asked a question that surprised Michael. "Did Mommy love me?" Michael smiled gently and held Luke's hand. "Yes, Luke. She loved you very much." Luke closed his eyes and rested against his father's chest. It was the first time he spoke about his mother without fear. The next day, Michael called Luke's teacher to talk about his silence and sadness. They agreed to help Luke at school by giving him more chances to express himself and by encouraging other children to include him. Slowly, Luke started to share little things. He told his teacher about the birds he saw in the garden, about the teddy bear, and about his favorite book. It was not much, but it was a start. At home, Michael read stories to Luke every night. They chose books about kindness, courage, and hope. Sometimes, Michael told stories about his own childhood, making Luke laugh with funny moments and mistakes. One evening, Luke looked up at his father and said, "I like your stories, Dad." Michael smiled. "I'm glad, Luke. And I like listening to your stories, too." Luke was learning to trust and to feel safe again. But the scars inside him were still there. They were quiet, but they shaped how Luke saw the world. Michael understood that healing was not a quick fix. It was a slow process, like the changing of seasons. Some days were bright and warm, others were cold and gray. One afternoon, Michael took Luke to a small park nearby. They sat on a bench under a big oak tree. "Luke," Michael said, "sometimes people carry invisible scars. They hurt inside even when you can't see it. But with love and patience, those scars can heal." Luke looked at the leaves above them, shining in the sunlight. "Will my scars ever go away?" Michael thought for a moment. "Maybe not completely. But they will get smaller. And you will be stronger because of them." Luke smiled faintly and nodded. That day, as they walked home, Michael felt hope. The road ahead would be long and sometimes hard, but he knew they would walk it together. Luke's silence was no longer just a mystery. It was a story waiting to be told, a story of pain, but also of love and courage. And Michael promised himself that he would never stop listening. The day of Luke's 12th birthday arrived with a sky so blue it seemed to promise happiness. Michael wanted to make this day special. He planned a big party in their mansion, inviting friends, family, and neighbors. The house was filled with balloons, colorful lights, and delicious food. Everyone wore smiles, and laughter echoed in the rooms. But Luke was quiet. He did not run around like the other children or shout with joy. Instead, he stayed close to his father's side, watching the celebration with calm eyes. Michael noticed his son's silence and felt a mixture of worry and hope. Maybe today, Luke would finally speak more. As the party went on, people sang songs and played games. Luke watched quietly but didn't join. Michael tried to talk to him many times, asking about the gifts, the cake, and the music. Luke gave small answers or just smiled politely. The silence still wrapped around Luke like a soft blanket, hiding his true feelings. Near the end of the party, Michael lifted Luke's favorite chocolate cake with bright candles. Everyone gathered around and sang happy birthday. Luke's eyes reflected the flickering flames, but he did not blow out the candles. Instead, he stared at the cake, his face serious and quiet. Suddenly, Luke's eyes filled with tears. No one expected this. The guests stopped singing, and the room became very still. Michael moved closer, concern written on his face. He gently asked, "Luke, are you okay?" Luke wiped a tear from his cheek and looked up at his father. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, he said something that shocked everyone. "Who hurt you, Mommy?" The room fell silent. Michael's heart stopped for a moment. Those words, simple but full of pain, hit him like a sudden storm. Everyone looked at Luke, surprised that the boy who rarely spoke had finally said something so deep and powerful. Michael took a deep breath and knelt beside Luke. "Why do you ask that, son?" he said softly. Luke looked away, his small hands twisting nervously. "Because she was sad. I think someone made her hurt." Michael felt a wave of sadness and guilt. He had never told Luke the whole story about his mother's struggles. It was a difficult memory that Michael had tried to keep hidden to protect his son. But now, Luke was ready to ask the questions that had been silent for years. Michael reached out and held Luke's hand tightly. "Your mother had hard times, Luke. She was very sad, but she loved you more than anything." Luke's eyes searched his father's face, looking for answers. "Did she love me enough to stay?" Michael's voice was gentle, but his heart ached. "Sometimes love is not enough when people are hurting inside. But she never stopped loving you, and neither did I." Luke's tears began to fall more freely. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel the pain he had kept hidden. The tears were not just sadness but a release, like a river breaking through a dam. Michael held Luke close, comforting him as the boy cried. Around them, the party guests quietly gave space, understanding this moment was private and important. After a while, Luke stopped crying and looked up at Michael with tired eyes. "I didn't know how to say it before," he said softly, "but I needed to ask." Michael kissed Luke's forehead and smiled warmly. "Thank you for telling me. It helps us both." That night, after the party had ended and the guests had gone home, Michael and Luke sat together in the quiet living room. The big house felt different now, warmer and more alive. Michael spoke slowly, sharing stories about Sarah, Luke's mother, her dreams, her fears, and her love for Luke. Luke listened, learning more about the mother he barely remembered. They talked for hours, filling the silence that had been between them for so long. The questions Luke had carried in his heart were now spoken aloud, and the answers helped to heal. Michael realized that this moment when Luke finally spoke those words was a turning point. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where they could face their pain together. The next day, Luke seemed lighter, as if a weight had lifted from his shoulders. He smiled more and even said a few words that surprised Michael. "Thank you, Dad," Luke said quietly, "for listening." Michael smiled back, feeling hope grow inside him. He knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but he also knew they would walk it together stronger and closer than ever before. Sometimes, it takes just one question, spoken from a silent heart, to open the door to healing. After Luke's birthday, something changed between him and Michael. The silence that had surrounded the boy began to lift, like morning fog slowly fading in the sun. Luke still did not talk a lot, but now, when he spoke, his words were full of feeling and meaning. Michael treasured each word, knowing how much courage it took for Luke to say them. Michael wanted to help Luke heal. He decided to bring a special person into their lives, someone trained to help children with feelings they cannot easily say. So, he found a kind counselor named Mrs. Roberts, who worked gently with kids who were sad or scared. The first time Luke met Mrs. Roberts, he was nervous. He held tightly to his teddy bear, sitting quietly on the soft chair in her office. The room was warm and decorated with colorful pictures, toys, and books. Mrs. Roberts smiled kindly and said, "Hello, Luke. It's okay to be quiet here. You can tell me anything you want, or just listen. I'm here to help." Luke nodded slowly. He didn't say much at first, but Mrs. Roberts was patient. She let Luke draw pictures, play with toys, or just sit and breathe. She never rushed him. After a few visits, Luke began to share small stories. He talked about the birds in the garden, the teddy bear his mother gave him, and sometimes, about the dark clouds he saw in his dreams. Mrs. Roberts listened carefully and helped Luke find words for his feelings. One afternoon, after a session with Mrs. Roberts, Luke came home and found Michael waiting for him in the garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky with orange and pink. "Hi, Luke," Michael said warmly. "How was your day?" Luke looked up at his father and smiled a little. "I talked to Mrs. Roberts. She helped me feel better." Michael's eyes filled with tears of relief. "I'm proud of you, son. That's very brave." Luke's smile grew. "I'm trying. It's hard, but I want to be happy." Michael knelt down beside Luke and hugged him tightly. "We'll work on it together, Luke. You're not alone." As weeks passed, Luke slowly changed. He began to laugh softly when Michael told funny stories, and sometimes he asked questions about things he had never noticed before, like why the leaves changed color in autumn or why the stars twinkled at night. Michael watched with joy. The boy who had been silent for so long was starting to find his voice. One day, while they were in the garden, Luke picked up a small flower and handed it to Michael. "For you, Dad," Luke said shyly. Michael smiled and took the flower. "Thank you, Luke. It's beautiful, just like you." Luke blushed and looked away. That simple moment was full of love and hope. But healing was not always easy. Some days, Luke would feel sad again, and the silence would return. On those days, Michael would sit quietly with him, holding his hand and waiting for Luke to feel ready to speak. Michael learned that healing is like the sea, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy. But with patience and love, even storms pass. One rainy evening, Michael found Luke sitting by the window, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass. "Do you want to talk, Luke?" Michael asked softly. Luke shook his head. "Not now, Dad." Michael smiled gently. "That's okay. I'm here whenever you're ready." Luke smiled back, feeling safe. Michael realized that love means being present, even in silence. It means holding on when things are hard and never giving up. As the days turned into months, Luke's world grew brighter. He made a few friends at school and joined a small art club, where he could draw and paint. The colors on his paper became brighter too, showing the happiness he was beginning to feel inside. Michael was proud but also careful. He knew the past was still part of Luke's story. There were memories and feelings that would take time to heal. But now, Luke had a chance to grow stronger and happier. One night, after reading a story together, Luke surprised Michael by asking, "Dad, Will mommy be proud of me someday? Michael hugged Luke close and whispered, she already is, Luke. She loves you very much, and so do I. Luke smiled and rested his head on his father's shoulder. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. The journey was not over, but Luke had taken a big step toward healing. And Michael knew, with love and patience, they would find happiness together. The days grew warmer as spring returned to the city. The garden around Michael and Luke's mansion bloomed with colorful flowers and fresh green leaves. The air smelled sweet and hopeful. It was a new season, and with it came a new feeling between father and son, something bright and gentle, like the sunlight through the trees. Michael noticed that Luke's steps were lighter, and his eyes shone with curiosity. The boy was no longer a silent shadow in the big house. He was beginning to live, to explore, and to dream again. One morning, Michael invited Luke to go for a walk in the city park. It was a place full of children playing, people laughing, and dogs running freely. The sound of joyful voices filled the air, and Michael hoped this day would help Luke feel more connected to the world. As they walked, Luke stopped by a group of kids playing soccer. He watched quietly, interested but unsure if he wanted to join. Michael smiled and said, "Would you like to play with them, Luke?" Luke hesitated. Then, with a small nod, he took a step forward. The children welcomed him warmly, passing the ball and cheering him on. Luke's face lit up with a smile he had not shown in a long time. The game was not perfect, but it did not matter. For the first time in years, Luke felt like he belonged. After the game, Luke and Michael sat on a bench under a tall oak tree. Luke's cheeks were flushed from running, and his eyes sparkled with excitement. "Dad," Luke said softly, "I didn't know playing could be so much fun." Michael laughed. "It's fun to try new things, Luke. I'm proud of you for joining." Luke looked thoughtful. "I want to try more new things. I want to be brave." Michael's heart swelled with hope. The boy who had been so quiet and scared was growing stronger every day. Back at the mansion, Michael continued to spend time with Luke. They painted together, took walks in the garden, and read stories by the fireplace. The house felt warmer now, filled with soft laughter and quiet conversations. One evening, Luke surprised Michael by asking, "Dad, can I invite my friend Tom to play?" Michael smiled and said, "Of course, Luke. I'd like to meet him." When Tom came over, Michael saw how happy Luke was. The boys played games, shared snacks, and talked about school. It was a small but important step for Luke, opening his heart to friendship. Michael realized that healing was not just about fixing pain but about building joy and trust. It was about learning to live again after sadness. One afternoon, Michael took Luke to visit a small art gallery. The walls were covered with colorful paintings and photographs. Luke's eyes widened as he looked at each piece carefully. "Do you like the paintings?" Michael asked. Luke nodded. "I want to paint like this someday." Michael smiled. "Then let's make that happen." At home, they set up a small art corner with paints, brushes, and paper. Luke spent hours there, creating pictures full of color and life. His paintings told stories of sunshine, of birds flying, of happy days. Through art, Luke found a new way to speak without words. Michael watched with pride as his son's world grew brighter with each brush stroke. But healing was not always easy. Sometimes, Luke still felt sad or scared. One night, he came to Michael, holding his teddy bear tightly. "Dad," Luke said quietly, "sometimes I still feel lonely." Michael held him close. I know, Luke. And that's okay. We will always be here for each other. Luke nodded and smiled faintly. The fear was still there, but it was smaller now. Michael thought about Sarah, Luke's mother. Though she had left, her love remained in the small things: the teddy bear, the stories, the memories. Michael promised to keep that love alive for Luke, helping him grow strong and happy. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden watching the sunset, Luke said, "Dad, thank you for never giving up on me." Michael hugged him tightly. "You're my son, Luke. I will always love you." The mansion no longer felt empty or cold. It was a home filled with hope, healing, and new beginnings. And for Michael and Luke, this was just the start of their journey, a journey full of love, courage, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. A whole year had passed since Luke had asked those powerful words, "Who hurt you, Mommy?" That moment had opened a door to healing, love, and understanding between a father and his son. Now, Luke was different. He was still gentle and quiet, but not afraid. He smiled more often. He asked questions. He laughed when something was funny. He painted his thoughts with colors, and slowly, he was learning how to speak from his heart. Michael saw the change and felt thankful every single day. He remembered the boy who once sat in silence, afraid to speak, holding sadness in his eyes. And now, he saw a child who was brave, kind, and slowly turning into a confident young boy. One morning, Michael and Luke visited a small town library. It was peaceful inside. The sunlight shone through the windows, falling softly on the wooden floor. Luke walked between the rows of books, reading titles and touching the covers gently. He stopped at one shelf and pulled out a book about families: happy families, sad families, and families that grow stronger after pain. He looked up at his father and asked, "Dad, do you think our family is okay now?" Michael knelt down beside him. "Yes, Luke. We may have gone through hard times, but we never stopped being a family. And now, we're stronger than before." Luke smiled and hugged the book. "Can we read it together?" "Of course," Michael said, taking his hand. "Always." That evening, they sat by the fireplace at home, just like they used to, and read the book together. The story was about a little bird who got lost in a storm but found his way back home through love and patience. When they reached the final page, Luke closed the book gently. "I was like that bird," he said softly. Michael nodded. "Yes. But you found your way, Luke. And I'll always be here to guide you." Weeks later, the school planned a special event, a family day. Each student was asked to speak about someone who gave them strength and love. When Luke heard about it, he became quiet. Michael noticed his silence and asked, "Are you nervous?" Luke looked down. "Yes. What if I can't speak in front of everyone?" Michael placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay to be nervous. But remember, your voice is strong not because it's loud, but because it comes from your heart." Luke thought for a moment and nodded. "I want to try." The day of the event arrived. The school hall was full of parents, students, and teachers. Michael sat in the front row, his hands gently folded, waiting for Luke's turn. His heart beat fast, not with fear, but with pride. When Luke's name was called, the room became quiet. Luke walked up to the small stage with calm steps. He stood behind the microphone, looked at the crowd, then at his father. Michael smiled, giving him all the strength he needed. Luke took a deep breath and began. "My name is Luke," he said. "For a long time, I didn't talk much. I was scared, and I didn't know how to say what I felt. But someone helped me. Someone waited for me to speak. He never gave up on me. Luke paused. His eyes were a little wet, but his voice stayed strong. My dad is my hero. He listened when I was silent. He stayed with me when I was sad. He taught me that healing takes time and love. Because of him, I'm not afraid to speak anymore. The room filled with soft claps, and some people wiped their eyes. Luke continued, and I miss my mom. I know she had pain, too. But I believe she wanted me to be happy. And now, I am learning how to be happy. Michael stood, his eyes full of tears. Luke looked at him and smiled. Thank you, Dad, he said into the microphone, for being my safe place. The hall burst into gentle applause. Michael walked to the stage and hugged Luke tightly. I'm so proud of you, son, he whispered. That night, as they returned home, the sky was full of stars. Luke looked up and said, Do you think Mommy can see us? Michael looked at the sky, his arm around Luke. Yes. I believe she sees you, and she's proud, very proud. Luke nodded and held his father's hand tightly. The house no longer felt like just a building with walls. It was now filled with warmth, light, laughter, and quiet moments of love. A true home. Luke's journey wasn't perfect. There were still memories, still moments of sadness. But he had learned to face them. He had found his voice, and even more he had found peace.